in Detroit, and only 500 home buyers could get a mortgage. It is absolutely depressing the property values and the comeback of our city. And the reason for it has nothing to do with credit scores and income. It is 100% a problem of appraisals, and it came out of the last housing crisis in 2008. The problem is this: in case after case, the seller and the buyer agree to buy the house for $60,000. The appraiser comes out and appraises it at $50,000. It doesn't matter what the credit score or the income is. After the last housing crisis, the regs say you can't give a mortgage if you are in excess of the value under the traditional way that it's done. And what is so frustrating about it is this: appraisals look backwards. And if you look at what's happened in the housing market in this area, you go to the suburbs all around Detroit, housing prices are pretty much where they were in 2007. They've recovered. In Detroit, we're 50% below. And so what happens? If you get a raise, you want to buy a house, you can't buy the $60,000 house in Detroit because you can't get the mortgage, but you can buy a $200,000 house in Ferndale. Same income, same credit score. We were driving people out of the city. And so when I realized this was a problem, I basically did what I always do, went to everybody. So in December 2014, Governor Snyder brought his cabinet. And we went out and did a tour of these neighborhoods. And I showed them all the things we're doing with the demolitions, the rehabs, the auctions. That's all working. But I said, nothing's going to work if you can't get a mortgage. And he says, this doesn't make any sense. I'm going to get MSHDA on top of this, and we're going to work on a solution. The next month in January, President Obama came to town when he visited the Wayne Assembly Plant. And he and I sat down afterwards, and he says, what can I do to help? And I said, nothing's going to change if we don't solve this mortgage problem. And I gave him a little piece of paper. And I showed him a person who could not get a $50,000 mortgage for a big, beautiful brick home in Green Acres, 2 blocks south of 8 Mile, but who got approved for a little stick house, $200,000 mortgage in Ferndale. And I showed him why it was happening. And he said, this is terrible, we're going to fix it. And so he took Cliff Kellogg from the Treasury Department, and he designated Cliff the White House liaison, and he said to Cliff, your job is to fix this problem. And Cliff said, yes, Mr. President. Yeah. I wasn't really sure what to do. So we had the governor and the president on board, but our problem was that the people who issued the mortgages were the banks. We said, all right, what do we do? In February, former President Bill Clinton called me, and he invited me to come out to Denver to speak at the Clinton Global Initiative retreat, which is their annual event, be on the stage. And he says, what issue do you want to talk about? I said, let me tell you what's going on in the mortgages. And I explained it to him. It took about a minute and a half before he completely grasped it. He says, I can help with that. I said, really? He says, yeah. He says, come on out, I'll take care of it. We went out to Denver, and he did a fascinating thing. He invited several banks and several foundations. And we were all in Denver together, and while everybody else was watching all the wonderful events on the stage, he had everybody locked in a room for 2 days. And it included representatives of the banks that you saw here. It also included people like Erica Gerson. It had folks from the Ford Foundation and the Kresge Foundation. Poor Laura Trudeau, I don't think, got out of the room for a couple of days. Frank Altman from CRF, who was critical. And at the end of the 2 days, we had the solution, the framework for the deal that's being rolled out today, came out of those 2 days with President Clinton. And I'm so glad that the head of the Clinton Global Initiative, Donna Shalala, is here to celebrate with us today because they were so critical. So they said, okay, we all agreed on it, right? It's going to solve the problem. Then we started to deal with the regulations. And here's the basic solution that we have come up with. It's what we call a soft second mortgage. If, in fact, the sale price is $60,000 and it appraises for $50,000, the bank says, we can give the traditional mortgage for $50,000. What are we going to do about the other $10,000? And so we had to create a soft second mortgage pool. Because, of course, this house that's at $60,000 sold for $150,000 8 years ago. We know that if Detroit keeps going the way it's going, that this will take care of itself. But in the short run, we got to get these houses sold. And so we said we need a $40 million fund And the governor in Michigan says, we'll put in the first $6 million. And then Rip Rapson, Laura Trudeau, and Kresge said, well, we'll match the state $6 million. Ford Foundation came in with some startup money, and the bank said, well, if everybody else putting in $12 million already, we'll put in $28 million. And so we created a $40 million pool. I don't think it's been done anyplace else in the country for the soft second. It's going to leverage another $75 or $100 million. Bottom line is that with this program, we're going to be able to make 1,000 mortgages that would not have been made before. And we want to be clear on this. This is not some low-income subsidized mortgage program. This isn't something for somebody with low credit scores. This is for people who could have easily or could have readily gotten a mortgage in Southfield or Warren or Farmington or Redford and were being forced to move out of the city, but couldn't get a mortgage in Detroit because of the appraisal problem. We've solved the appraisal problem, and you'll be able to get a mortgage in Detroit. And here's why it matters. There was a time when Detroit led America in home ownership. Today, 50% of the houses in Detroit are rentals. I mean, it's just a remarkable number. In this neighborhood, you've got a significant number of rentals. And we've got people in this neighborhood who are renting a house for $1,000 a month. If you were to buy this house, between the mortgage payment and the taxes, it'd be about $750 a month. And this is the case over and over. We have people renting for $600 and $800 and $1,000 a month who could buy the house, pay their mortgages and taxes for $200 a month less. That's how messed up the mortgage market has been. And if you think that the city is coming back, if you want to build wealth for yourself and your family, the greatest source of wealth building in America is owning a home. And it hasn't been happening in Detroit. And so with this program, people who are paying $600,000 and $800,000 a month in rent are going to be able to get that mortgage, are going to be able to own that house, are going to build up the equity, be able to pass it on to their children. And so I want to single out a few people. There's so many people who made this possible, in addition to the ones that I mentioned. Whatever your images of bank presidents are, there's three people I have to single out. Gary Torgo, the president of Talmer Bank, Sandro Dinello, the president of Flagstar, and Steve Steinauer, the president of Huntington Bank. These three bank presidents spent dozens and dozens of hours personally working through these details. They had to get federal regulators to go along with this. Steve brought the whole federal bureaucracy into Detroit, and so that we all got to election them together. They would call me on nights and weekends and say, look, I know we had a bad meeting today, but I got a solution. I said, my staff didn't even tell me about the bad meeting. But the staff would come in the next day. Cliff would say, hey, we had a problem yesterday. I said, it's okay. Sandro solved it last night. And that was how engaged these three individuals were. And so I just want to say thank you for them. It was, I think, a labor of love. And the last piece is, and I just want to say, for all five of these banks, for Huntington, for Flagstar, for Talmer, for First Merit, and for Liberty, those five banks came together. But the key meeting was I brought them all in at the end and I said, we need to have a single brand. Because people don't understand mortgages. I can't have a Liberty Detroit mortgage and a Talmer. Nobody's going to know what they're talking about. And so I want you guys to get away from the individual branding, and I want to have a single Detroit home mortgage where you can go into any one of those five banks, get the same Detroit home mortgage on the same terms. You can get your main mortgage, your second mortgage, one place, etc. Now, when they had to go back and tell their marketing departments, who are quite aggressive at competing against each other, that they were all going to pitch in together and brand something a Detroit home mortgage, again, it was against what's been done. But the fact that the five banks unified into a single Detroit home mortgage brand tells you how much they care. And so this is what this means to anybody who wants to buy a house in the city of Detroit. If you've got a steady job and good credit score, you can go in today.
Blew a fuse.
Okay. This is Kelly's way of saying I talk too long.
Subtle but effective?
Yeah, if you have a steady job and a good credit score, you can go in today. If you want to buy a house in Detroit, you can go into Talmer and Huntington or Liberty or First Merit or Flagstar, and you can get a mortgage regardless of the appraisal. We can get it done. You can buy that house. You can have ownership. It's a very special day. And one last note, one of the champions all the way along in this event, from beginning to end in building home ownership, has been my partner, Councilman James Tate, and I know you're going to hear from him as well. But this is a case where federal government, state government, city government, banks, foundation community all came together. And when you think that we only did 500 mortgages last year, an additional 1,000 mortgages, this is eventually going to solve itself, because the appraisals will come back up as we can start to buy at a true rate, and there won't be a need for this program. But for the next couple of years, this was life and death, and I just want to say thank you to everybody who's been involved.